a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Each day, I consume an elixir made from magical beans that brings life back to my somewhat beat up body. Coffee can almost bring the dead back to life. In my book, This Sucks, it does. This Sucks is about a guy who gets turned into a vampire, but he doesn't know how to be a vampire. I wrote it some time ago, and maybe I shouldn't have, but I did, and so it's out there. If you want to get a copy, you can find it at Amazon.com. It was my second attempt at humor. To get your hands on some of these magical beans, go to Organic Man Coffee Trike at 4501 McPherson and see what real coffee tastes like. If it's too far to get there from there, you can go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop and make the dead come back to life. It's almost Halloween. Time to start decorating. I have to thank Sergeant Elliot for my Art Bell coffee cup. It seems to make the best coffee in the universe taste even better. You, sir, are way too close to Washington. That can't possibly be good for your health. Kind of like living next to a black hole. But thank you very much for the coffee cup. I will do my best not to break it, which means I probably won't use it as much as I usually do. I'll use a metal cup. They're harder to break. I know I did a show on number stations sometime in the past. I searched my show notes. I even tried looking on iHeartRadio in the podcast section. Couldn't find it. Maybe I just dreamed the whole thing, or maybe I used a different name in the title and then forgot. I used to listen to Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis before it became a paid podcast. Now, I'm not cheap. I just am careful with my cash. I know if I start paying to listen to podcasts, the next thing I'll know, I'll have dozens of shows and I'll not have loads of money, which I don't have anyway, but it will attack my financials somewhat in a bad way. I know me. I know what would happen. That's why I never play with a Ouija board and I stay out of cemeteries at night. The only podcast I'm willing to pay for is Expanded Perspectives Elite, only because I know those guys. I met them up in Jefferson. We had dinner together. Back to Clyde Lewis. He did a couple of shows on number stations, which for those of us growing up during the Cold War could be quite unsettling. All that duck and cover and watch the skies. No, wait, that was from a movie. It was a weird time to grow up, especially seeing as the whole thing just might have been one big shell game instead of a chess game. Did Russia really want to blow us up? Or were the elites of the world using this as a means to scam billions of dollars from us all over the planet, while at the same time becoming enormously rich while we all lived in terror? The craziness was real. People were waiting for movies like Failsafe and Doctor Strangelove to actually happen. And on way too many occasions, they nearly did. Spies were real. I knew one way back in the day. He drank a bit and he was removed from service because of it. Once he was no longer allowed to do top secret things, well, he talked even more. Nothing to land him in prison, but he did have some wild tales to tell. The major problem with most spies was you could never be sure who they were actually working for. Once they were on the other side of the Iron Curtain, they just might be offered a much more lucrative income than the one our government was paying them. Any information sent back had to be confirmed by more than one source. Other spies had to be able to find the same intel. This led to having to have more than a few people all working on the same thing. Once some juicy bit of secret news was in hand, it needed to be sent back across the Iron Curtain, which could be very hazardous. If it fell into the wrong hands, well, the spy would find himself in hot water or cold water, depending. Anything on paper had to be carried either in a diplomatic mail bag, which sometimes those could be searched, or it had to be hidden away in some dark orifice somewhere. Unpleasant, to say the least. Sending it over the airwaves was done a lot, but the intel needed to be encrypted, and the radio had to be hidden somewhere safe. The enemy had all kinds of ways to track down any unauthorized transmitters. Also, any electronic equipment was prone to break down, so somebody had to be able to maintain it. The intelligence folks didn't all run around spying on each other. Some had special missions they were trained to perform, and they would sit and wait until orders came saying, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep." If you didn't see the movie Telephone, you missed a pretty good spy movie. Charles Bronson was a Ruski. He almost was convincing, too. These folks weren't called spies, they were called sleeper agents. They were given instructions on what to do and told to wait for proper code words, which would be sent out over shortwave radio. Since they didn't need to transmit, the radio could be small and easily replaced if it got damaged. The agent could literally pick one up at any electronics store since nothing about the radio was unique. It was just a radio. Shortwave radio is transmitted using radio frequencies in the shortwave band. There's no official definition of the band range, but it includes all of the high frequency, which extends from 3 to 30 megahertz. It lies between the medium frequency band and the bottom of the VHF. My neighbor Eddie has a shortwave antenna on top of his garage, but he works so much he hardly ever has time to use his radio. Radio waves can be reflected or refracted from a layer of electronically charged atoms in the atmosphere known as the ionosphere. Shortwave directed at an angle into the sky can be reflected back to Earth at great distance, beyond the horizon. This is called shortwave or skip propagation. Shortwave radio can be used for communications over very long distances. It's in contrast to radio waves of higher frequencies, which travel in a straight line and are generally limited by the visual horizon at about 40 miles. The whole world can listen in since the airwaves are the same everywhere. This leads to encryption. The Enigma machine was one example of a really advanced encryption device, but you had to have the machine in order to use it. Sneaking a secret mechanism would have made the sleeper agents way too easy to identify. If all you're doing is listening, all you need is a radio and the key to unlock the message. One common type of key was the book. Both parties had to have the exact same copy of this book for it to work. It could be the Bible, it could be the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, just about any book imaginable. The sender would transmit a page number and the position of the word on the page. The listener would flip from page to page, picking out the words until an entire message was there. Then there was the replacement cipher. Each letter was replaced either by a number or a different letter. Since the vowels are used the most, all you needed to do was sift through the message looking for the common letters or numbers, and eventually you could break the code. During World War II, just about every Enigma machine ended their message by saying, Heil Hitler, which the folks at Bletchley Park managed to use to decipher some of the messages. Really, was it necessary to say that at the end of every message so you knew what letters HEIL, HITLER were? Because they said it every time. To create an unbreakable code, you have to make it so complex that the agent in the field is going to be unable to memorize it. So the key was written down on a piece of paper, which is known as a pad. Once the key was used, it was burned, and the next page was set aside, waiting for the next message. Spies have been discovered with small, neatly inscribed pages hidden in all kinds of weird places. One guy had a hollowed out bar of soap with a dozen small encrypted keys inside. The radio frequency used had to be the same each time so the agent knew where to listen in. The frequency has to be kept open, as in no one else might decide to jump on and transmit on that particular location. The number stations transmit a sound day in and day out to hold on to that particular frequency. Some play a tone, while others send out a musical sound. When something important is about to be heard, the tone or the music will be replaced by a voice saying some key phrase. Number stations can be technically categorized into three transmission types: numbers, Morse code, and noise-based signals. Sometimes they can have more than one type of transmission. Each category represents different approaches to information encoding and transmission. Voice-based number stations typically employ pre-recorded messages that are delivered by female or child voices, often used digitally synthesized speech that ensure consistent audio quality, and it eliminates operator identification. The technical quality of these recordings varies significantly, with some stations employing high fidelity audio, while others you can barely understand what they were saying. I guess it depended on how important the agent in the fields was and what his mission might have been. Morse code implements implementation represents the most technically straightforward approach, utilizing traditional signaling methods that have remained largely unchanged since the early 20th century. That was how the Nazis did it in World War II, except the coding was done by the Enigma machine, and then they just typed it out on a keypad. These transmissions often feature machine-generated Morse code at a standardized speed, typically between 15 to 25 words per minute, optimized for manual reception and transmission by field operatives. The consistency of timing and character formation in these transmissions suggests automated generation systems rather than a human operator. The third category encompasses various forms of noise-based or tonal transmissions that may represent advanced encoding schemes or deliberate jamming operations. These signals often consist of complex tonal patterns, burst transmissions, or modulated noise that require specialized analysis techniques and equipment in order to decode the information that is coming in. A number station is a shortwave radio station characterized by broadcasts of formatted numbers which are believed to be addressed to intelligence officers operating in other countries. Most identified stations use speech synthesis to vocalize their numbers, although digital modes such as phase shift keying and frequency shift keying, as well as Morse code transmissions, are not uncommon. Most stations have set time schedules or schedule patterns. However, some appear to simply come on the radio anytime they wish and send out a message. How the receiving agent is going to know when is beyond me. The genesis of number stations traces back to the earliest days of military radio communication, with British forces employing basic wireless signals during the Boer War in 1890s. The British Navy operated without cryptography techniques, since they were the only ones using the radios at the time. This advantage quickly dissolved as other stations adopted radio technology, which necessitated the development of se- secure communications that led to massive encryption of the radio messages. The outbreak of World War I marked a critical point in military communications strategy. British forces deliberately severed undersea communication cables connecting England to Germany, which forced the German military to rely exclusively on radio communications across all of Europe. Number stations were most abundant during the Cold War. According to an internal Cold War era report from the Polish Ministry of the Interior, number stations DCF-37 and DFD-21 were transmitted from West Germany beginning in the early 1950s. Many stations from this era continued to broadcast, and some long-time stations may have been taken over by different operators. The Czech Ministry of the Interior and the Swedish Security Service have both acknowledged the use of number stations by the Czechoslovakian for espionage, with declassified documents that prove it. One well-known number station was the E03 Lincolnshire Poacher, which is thought to have been run by the British Secret Intelligence Service. It was first broadcast from Bletchley Park in the mid-1970s, but later was broadcast from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. It ceased broadcasting in 2008, or it moved on to some other location. In 2001, the United States tried the Cuban Five on charges of spying for Cuba. The group had received and decoded messages that had been broadcast from the Atencion number station in Cuba. The Atencion station in Cuba became the world's first number station to be officially and publicly accused of transmitting to spies. It was a centerpiece of the United States federal court espionage trial following the arrest of the WASP network of Cuban spies in 1998. The U.S. prosecutors said the accused would write down number codes received from Atencion using Sony handheld shortwave receivers and typing the numbers into laptop computers so they could decode them. The FBI testified that they had entered a spy's apartment in 1995 and they copied the computer decryption program for the Atencion number code. They used it to decode Atencion spy messages, which the prosecutors unveiled in court. In 2001, Ana Belén Montes, a senior U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency analyst, was arrested and charged with espionage. The federal prosecutor said Montes was able to communicate with the Cuban Intelligence Directorate through encoded messages, with instructions being received through encrypted shortwave transmissions from Cuba. In 2006, Carlos Alvarez and his wife Elsa were arrested and charged with espionage. The U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida stated the defendants would receive assignments via shortwave radio transmissions. In June of 2009, the United States charged Walter Kendall Myers with the conspiracy to spy for Cuba and receiving and decoding messages broadcast from a number station operated by the Cuban Intelligence Directorate to further that conspiracy, as discovered by the FBI in 2010. One-way Russian agents of the illegal program were receiving instructions via coded messages on shortwave radio. It had been reported that the United States had used number stations to communicate information to operatives in other countries. So it's not just the commies that were doing it. Both sides had number stations. The State Department operated stations such as KKN 50 and KKN 44 used to broadcast similar number messages. North Korea revived number broadcast in July 2016 after 16 years of not using one, a move which some analysts speculated was psychological warfare. 16 such broadcasts occurred in 2017, including unusually timed transmissions. April was a busy month when it came to bizarre occurrences, especially number stations, but I couldn't find anything that may have been tied to North Korea. The way the world works these days, it could have been anything. It could have been something that North Korea was picking up for somebody else. It has long been speculated and was argued in one court case that these stations operate as a simple and foolproof method for government agencies to communicate with spies working undercover. According to this idea, the message must have been encrypted with a one-time pad to avoid any risk of decryption by the enemy. The one-way voice link is a covert communication system that transmitted messages to an agent's unmodified shortwave radio using the high-frequency shortwave band 3 to 30 megahertz at a predetermined time, date, and frequency contained in their communications plan. The transmissions were contained in a series of repeated random number sequences and could only be deciphered using the agent's one-time pad. If proper tradecraft was practiced and instructions were precisely followed, a transmission was considered unbreakable. As long as the agent's cover could be justified, the owning of a shortwave radio, and he was not under any kind of a surveillance. Shortwave was a secure preferred method for the CIA during the Cold War. Evidence to support this theory includes the fact number stations have changed details of their broadcast or produced special, non-scheduled broadcasts that coincided with extraordinary political events, such as the attempted coup in August 1991 in the Soviet Union. Generally, number stations follow a basic format, although there are many differences in details between stations. Transmissions usually begin on the hour or the half hour. The prelude, introduction, or call up of the transmission, from which stations informal nicknames are often derived, includes some kind of an identifier for the station itself, the intended recipient, or both. This can take the form of numeric or radio alphabet code names, characteristic phrases, and sometimes musical or electronic sounds. Sometimes, as in the case of radio alphabet stations, the prelude can also signify the nature or the priority of the message that follows. Often, the prelude repeats for a period before the body of the message begins. After the prelude, there is usually an announcement of the number or number groups in the message, the page to be used from the one-time pad, or other pertinent information. The group of numbers are then recited. Groups are usually either 4 or 5 digits or radio alphabet letters. The groups are typically repeated either by reading each group twice or by repeating the entire message as a whole. Some stations send more than one message during a transmission. In this case, some or all of the above process will be repeated. After all the messages have been sent, the station will sign off in some characteristic fashion. Usually, it will simply be some word such as end, which has been prearranged. Some stations, especially those in the Soviet Union, would end by listing a number of zeros. Sometimes it'd be 00, or it could be 0000, but of course it was in Russian. Because of the secretive nature of the message, the cryptographic function employed by the particular station is not publicly known. It is assumed that most stations use a one-time pad that would make the contents of these number groups indistinguishable from randomly generated numbers or digits. In one confirmed case, West Germany did use a one-time pad for number transmissions. The pad is a set of 2 copies of the alphabet and its substitutions. One is held by the number station encoder and one by the agent. Each letter may be represented by one letter, number, or even a series of each. Using the pad, the numbers have to be turned into letters, which on occasion also need to be deciphered. Since there are only two copies, and as soon as it is used, the pad is destroyed, the chances of anybody managing to break the code is about zero. Even the people transmitting the numbers may not know what the code is because the only person with the pad is the guy that encrypted the thing. High frequency radio signals transmitted at relatively low power can travel around the world under ideal propagation conditions, which are affected by local noise levels, weather, the seasons, and even sunspots. And it can be best received with properly tuned antenna and a good receiver. Although few number stations have been tracked down by location, the technology used to transmit the numbers has historically been clear. Stock shortwave transmitters using power from 10 kilowatts to 100 kilowatts. Amplitude modification, or AM, transmitters, which operate variable frequencies, use Class C power output stages with plate modification, and the workhorse of international shortwave broadcast include number stations. Some of y'all will understand that, like Art Bell would have known what all that was, but I'm not into shortwave. Application of spectrum analysis to number station signals has revealed the presence of data bursts, radio type modulated subcarriers, phase shifted carriers, and other unusual transmitter modulations like polytones or multitones. Modulated subcarriers were also present on some U.S. commercial radio transmissions during the Cold War. So they're not just sending out a number code, sometimes they're sending out burst messages at the same time. In telecommunications, a burst transmission or data burst is a broadcast of a relatively high bandwidth transmission over a very short period. Burst transmission can be intentional, broadcasting a compressed message at a very high data signaling rate within a very short transmission time. The frequency reported use of high-tech modulations like data bursts in combination or in sequence with spoken numbers suggests varying transmissions for differing intelligence operations. So they can be sending out 2, 3, 4 messages at the exact same time. I wonder if the guy listening to the numbers feels slighted, maybe knowing that some highfalutin technical wizard somewhere is getting his message handed to him in like a couple of seconds. The burst needs to be recorded and then turned into an understandable message. Now my cats are being cats in the wrong place. Those receiving the signals have to work only with available handheld receivers, sometimes under difficult local conditions, and in all reception conditions. In the field, low-tech spoken number transmissions continue to have the advantage even in today's technical world. You can't beat simple technology. High-tech data receiving equipment can be difficult to obtain, and even a non-standard civilian shortwave radio can sometimes be difficult, depending on which country you're in. Some countries, it's against the law to have a shortwave radio. A BBC frequency, 7325 kilohertz, has also been used. This prompts a letter to the BBC from a listener in Andorra. She wrote to the World Service Waveguide in 1983, complaining that the radio program that she was listening to was spoiled when a female voice reading out numbers in English came on instead of the music she was expecting. The BBC presenter laughed at the suggestion of spy activity. He had consulted the experts at Bush House, who declared that the voice was reading out nothing more sinister than snowfall figures for ski slopes near the listener's home. After more research into this case, shortwave enthusiasts are now certain that the number station was actually broadcasting a secret code and they had accidentally gotten on the wrong frequency. In October 1990, it was reported that a number station had been interfering with communications on 6577 kilohertz, a frequency used by air traffic in the Caribbean. The interference was so bad that they had to tell the airplane pilots to switch to another frequency in order to communicate with air traffic control. The North Korean Foreign Language Service, Voice of Korea, began to broadcast on E03 Lincolnshire Poacher, their former frequency of 11545 kilohertz in 2006. They were believed to probably be deliberately trying to interfere with their signal. Lincolnshire Poacher broadcast on 3 different frequencies, and the remaining 2 were not interfered with, so it sounds like the North Koreans didn't know there was 3 signals and not 1. September 27th, 2006, amateur radio transmissions on 30 megahertz band were affected by the S06 Russian Man number station. So sometimes you get these things where the transmission is accidentally moved to another frequency, not by switching the dial, but simply because that's how radio works. The Cuban number station HM01 has been known to interfere with shortwave broadcasts of Voice of Wealth on 11530 kilohertz. Number station transmissions have often been the target of international jamming attempts. Despite this targeting, many number stations continue to broadcast unhindered. Historical examples of jamming include the E10, a station thought to originate from the Israeli Mossad intelligence agents, which was being jammed by the Chinese music station, thought to originate from the People's Republic of China, and usually used to jam Sound of Hope radio broadcasts, which are anti-CCP in nature. Monitoring and chronicling transmissions from number stations has been a hobby for shortwave and ham radio enthusiasts from the early 1970s. Number stations are often given nicknames, often reflecting some distinctive element of the station, such as an interval signal. For example, the Lincolnshire Poacher station used to play bars from this folk song known as the Lincolnshire Poacher before each string of numbers. Sometimes these traits have helped to uncover the broadcasting location. The Atención station was thought to be from Cuba because an error allowed Radio Havana, Cuba to be carried on the same frequency. Although many number stations have nicknames, which usually describe some aspect of the station itself, these nicknames have sometimes led to a lot of confusion among listeners, particularly when discussing stations with similar traits. The Enigma Number Stations Monitoring Group began assigning a code to each known station. Portions of the original Enigma group moved to other interests in 2000, and the classification of number stations was continued by a group known as Enigma 2000. The document contained a description of each number station and its code designation. It was called the Enigma Control List. In 2016, after which it incorporated into the Enigma 2000 active station list. If you're curious about any of these, you can just look them up on the internet and find all of these stations listed. The latest edition of the list was published in September 2017. This classification scheme takes the form of a letter followed by a number. The letter indicates the language used by the station that you want to listen to. If you speak Russian, look for an R before a number. If you only want to listen to English, look for an E. Why would this still be in use today? Computers are everywhere, and it would seem like the logical thing to do is just send a message out using encrypted email. Computers are also very good at spotting codes and then uncoding them, deciphering them. A computer ID, also sometimes referred to as a hardware ID, a device identifier or machine fingerprint, is a unique identifier that is assigned to each computer or device, usually when used on a network. Its primary purpose is to determine uniqueness as well as persistence of a machine among multiple devices. You also have an IP address. An Internet Protocol address is a unique identifying number assigned to every device connected to the Internet. An IP address definition is a numeric label assigned to devices that use the Internet to communicate. Computers that communicate over the Internet or via local networks share information to a specific location using their IP address. For every wild and crazy means of hiding these IDs, the government has developed ways to figure them out. If it's important enough, they can find things that have been deleted, erased, scrubbed, burned, and flushed down the toilet. Just because we can't remember our own passwords doesn't mean the government probably has them all written down somewhere. Wouldn't it be nice if there was some way you could call them up and say, hey, what's my password? Of course, you know the bad guys would do it too. Computers can be unlocked. The airwaves are all there around us at all times, and nobody has figured out how to control them yet. For a spy to disappear, they would have to effectively destroy any and all electronic equipment, and the risk of things being left behind is great. Any computer is hackable, and the intelligence organizations have some of the best hackers. Then there is the possibility of some agent on the other side deciding the best thing to do is to defect and take as many secrets as possible with them so they can sell them, which will lead to a very comfortable living. Knowledge is power, and power means money. A spy using shortwave is only harnessed by the need of a radio and his decryption papers. Number stations are still out there as we speak. Well, as I speak. They will probably be around for decades. UVB 76 is also known as the buzzer. The sound put out to hold the frequency is a buzzing sound. You can tune in day or night and listen for as long as your sensibilities will allow. Some people say the original call sign was UZB76. The numbers aren't all that important since they have changed several times over the last several years. Most folks will simply refer to it as UVB or simply the Buzzer. The Buzzer is an HF radio station that usually broadcasts at 4625 kilohertz on an upper sideband channel. Sideband is an obscure but very important way to communicate via radio. It is used primarily for two-way voice communication by ham radio operators, aircraft and air traffic control, ships at sea, military, and spy networks. Occasionally, some shortwave broadcast stations use this format. A lot of interesting and sometimes exciting talk goes on every day on these sidebands. The buzzer features a short, monotonous buzzing tone that repeats at a rate of approximately 25 tones per minute, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The station has been listened to by curious ham operators ever since about 1982. Till 2010, most transmissions in the Russian monolith code signals were extremely rare. When talking on any radio, you don't want to say letters the way that we're taught to in school. C sounds like D and P and G and E and a lot of other letters. In the Army and the Border Patrol, we used the phonetic alphabet. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Foxtrot, etc. Most police departments, for some odd reason, use Adam, Brian, Charles, David, or something like that. I'm not too sure. I was never in the police department, but I talked to a lot of cops. Everyone wants to have their own way of doing things, and naturally, Russia has their own phonetic alphabet. UVB 76, or the buzzer, also went by MDZB, which when said over the air was Mikhail Dmitry Zenya Boris. They also used ZU0Z, being said as Zenya Ulyana Olga Sinyada, and ANVF, Anna Nikola Vesali Foidor. I don't speak Russian, so if you're in Russia and you're listening to me, I'm sorry for mispronouncing your names, but like I said, I have a hard enough time with English. Russia writes numbers the same way that we do, Arabic numerals, like most of the planet does. They don't pronounce them that way. I am not even going to attempt to pronounce these things in Russian. If you're from Russia and you're listening and I say the wrong thing, well, I don't want to start a fight. The station transmissions on buzzing sound that lasts about 0.8 seconds, pauses for 1 to 1.3 seconds, and then repeats again 21 to 34 times a minute. 1 minute before the hour, the repeating tone is replaced by a continuous tone, which continues for about a minute until a short repeating buzz resumes. Between 7 and 7:50 Greenwich Mean Time, the station transmits using lower power, when transmitter maintenance is believed to be taking place. We don't know how long the buzzer has been broadcasting. They started out with 2-second pip sound and then changed to the buzzer in 1982. Otherwise, we would be calling it the pipper. In 2003, the buzzer went up in tone and length. It became 20 seconds long. This lasted for a while, but then it switched back to the original buzzer. Anytime there's a change in sound or length, folks get really excited thinking that something is about to happen because sometimes things did happen. The folks listening in have come to the realization the buzzer isn't being sent out directly, but it is being played by some recorder set near the microphone. On many occasions, sounds can be heard in the background, as if someone or several people are in the room. Working around radio equipment can lead to unfortunate things. One day at the fire station, one department on the north side of Houston accidentally opened their mic and left it that way for a long time, proceeding to destroy several people's reputations. The female radio operator was talking on the phone about her late night adventures with the local firefighter Stud Muffin. She compared him to every other man working at the station. Apparently, she ran around a bit. No, a lot. At 21:58 Greenwich Mean Time, December 24th, 1997, the buzzing abruptly stopped to be replaced by short series of beeps and a male voice speaking Russian who announced, "Ya, UVB 76, 18008. Boris, Roman, Olga, Mikhail, Anna, Larissa, 742 79914." The same message was repeated several times before the beep announced uh, the beginning of the buzzing once more. Had this been some kind of a glitch, it wouldn't have been repeated over and over the way it had been. I searched for any substantial activity from that day or around it, but I found nothing. Whatever happened was either kept quiet or nobody knows about it, but it seemed important at the moment. Could this have been a message alerting some agent or agents to act on some prearranged mission, or simply an oops? On February 20th, 1971, at 9:33 EM, 9:33 AM Eastern Standard Time, the National Warning Center sent out an emergency message to 800 television stations and 5,000 radio stations across the United States. Along with the message, the teletype operator sent out a code word indicating that the message was not a test, but a real live emergency. You know, the emergency broadcast system, those folks. This was the 1970s. Fear of nuclear attack was real. The war in Vietnam was still going on. Stations that had been directed to go off the air after reading the announcement did. People had no information beyond the initial message. Some stations simply went off the air without even broadcasting the message. Frantic people began calling neighbors and radio stations and the police asking what's going on, and nobody knew. When the warning center realized what had happened, they tried to cancel the broadcast. They tried 6 times to cancel it, and they failed each time. They couldn't find the correct code to cancel the emergency broadcast. It took more than 40 minutes after the first transmission for the civil defense to send an official cancellation message over the wire. Ah, such fun we had back then. Good times. Duck and cover, and then kiss your butt goodbye. Once the Iron Curtain came down, we discovered that the Soviets had just as many, if not more, problems with their World War III preparations than we did. Why we are still alive today must have been a miracle. God must have done something to keep the planet in shape because us humans, we sure were trying to destroy it. During World War II, the BBC played crucial role in supporting the French resistance by sending coded messages in their broadcasts. The broadcasts included seemingly nonsensical statements such as molasses tomorrow will bring forth cognac, which was actually instructions for sabotage. The folks listening in were being told it was go time, and the Nazis listening in were being told to make cognac using molasses. November 3rd, 2001, a conversation in Russian was heard. I'm not going to repeat it here because it sounded like some worker or maintenance guy was talking about repairs that he was doing to the station, and it was in Russian. September 12th, 2002, a similar voice message was broadcast, but with extreme distortion, which rendered it impossible to decipher. A third voice message was broadcast I'm making up months. February 21st, 2006. Again, the speaking voice was highly distorted, but the message's contents translated as 7559 7559 3952 5358 5525. Constantine 19090898. Tatiana. Oksana Anna Elena Pavel Skuka. Constantine 8497 559. Tatiana. Anna Larissa Ulonya 9414348. Great. I probably just told some Russian spy to do something nasty. In fact, I think I told several Russian spies to do something nasty. But like I said, this is from 2002, or 2006. So if they're just now getting this message, there's something really screwed up going on. July 5th, 2010, the buzzing ceased. No announcement, no explanations, only silence. Some worker walking through the room probably accidentally tripped over the power cord. Or it was one of these like, what does this button do? Oops. Uh, the following day, the broadcast simply resumed as if nothing had happened. For the rest of June and July, UVB 76 behaved pretty much as if nothing had happened. There were some short lived worrisome activity, including bits of what sounded like Morse code, but nothing dramatic, and as far as we know, nothing happened throughout the world. In mid August, the buzzing stopped again. Then it started, and then it stopped, and then it started. August 25th at 10:13, UVB 76 went entirely haywire. First, there was silence. Then the series of knocks and a shuffling sound was made as if somebody was moving things about the room. All the beeping, buzzing codes and numbers had hinted at an evil force hovering in the airwaves. And now it seemed as if some nincompoop was in control of that particular radio station and they were just dragging things across the floor, making noise. Kind of like when my cat gets on my computer and does things. For the first week in September, transmission was interrupted frequently, usually with what sounded like recordings of Dance of the Little Swans from Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. On the evening September 7th, something more dramatic. One listener said it was existential. At 8:48 p.m. Moscow time, a male voice issued a new call sign, Mikhail Dmitry Zenya Boris, indicating that the station was now called MDZB. This was followed by one of UVB 76 or MDZB's typically nebulous messages, 04979 DRENDOUT, followed by a longer series of numbers, and then TRENERSKIY, followed by more numbers. And of course, that was the Russian phonetic alphabet. I don't speak Russian. Distant conversations and other background noise could be heard behind the buzzer. This sound suggests that the buzzing noise is actually being played on a live, constantly open microphone, or the microphone may have been turned on accidentally. It's September 2010. The station was closed and abandoned. Reason they know this is they had figured out where they were broadcasting from. The transmitter was moved to St. Petersburg near a village of Kiro-Mosiv. This may have been due to reorganization of the Russian military. Voice messages from the buzzer were very rare until 2010. Then, suddenly, the airwaves became kind of pregnant with numbers. One transmission, August 23rd, 2010. UVB 76, UVB 76, 93882, Nymenia 74143574. This went on several times. Another transmission was on January 25th, 2013. More indecipherable letters and numbers that must have meant something to someone. One transmission, December 15th, 2015. More of the same. Numbers, letters, people's names, all sent out for some reason. March 2019, the station changed its assignment number again to Anna Nicole Vasily Feuder. All of this sounds like just a bunch of nonsense, and that's how it was supposed to be. Only the person sending the coded message and the person receiving it knew what was going on. The rest of us were kept in the dark. We're a bunch of mushrooms. The station's transmitter was relocated to Pavarova, Russia, and is now halfway between Zelongrad and another big city in Russia. It's about 25 miles northwest of Moscow. The location and the call signs are unknown until the first voice broadcast, and then all of a sudden we knew where they were, we just didn't know what they were saying. Some ham operators decided to try communicating back to the buzzer. One enterprising person actually had a brief conversation with the station. He asked if he could He asked if he could talk to the person in charge. One buzz for yes and two for no. The buzzer went off twice. He asked if he could tell a joke. Once again, there were two buzzes. This implies that not only is it an open mic, but somebody is listening. Can you imagine that's your job? Sit there in front of a radio and listen to that buzzing noise all day? I can't think of many worse jobs. One website claims the buzzer was meant to transmit orders to the military, or maybe the recruitment center in Moscow. This is unlikely, seeing as the station transmitted the buzzing tone for 15 years before any numbers were even broadcast. Because of the nature of the broadcast and the fact that its transmitter location is rumored to be a communications hub for the general staff of the Army, the buzzer is more than likely being used for spies. Transmitter sites for some number stations have been triangulated to military or intelligence installations in several countries, although no nation's government ever actually confirms or denies the existence of these stations. There's also the possibility the constant transmission is supposed to signal the availability, operation, or alertness of some kind of installation, what is known as a dead man switch, military or other installation, which is also known as the Russian dead hand system. The Russian dead hand system, also known as the perimeter system, it is an automated nuclear weapons control system designed to ensure a retaliatory strike, even if the country's leadership is incapacitated. A command and control system measures communications on military frequencies, radiation levels, air pressure, heat, and short-term seismic disturbances. If the measurements point to a nuclear attack, the perimeter begins a sequence that would end in the firing of every ICBM in the Russian arsenal. Perimeter would launch a command rocket tipped with a radio warhead that transmits launch codes to Russian nuclear silos. Even if the radio system is being jammed, it works. The rocket would fly across the entire length of the country. After a number of test launches to prove the viability of such a command rocket, the perimeter system went online in 1985. Does that make you sleep good at night? You can listen in on the radio if you'd like. Go to, and you don't have to have a shortwave radio, you can do it right now using your computer. You can go to UVB-76.ru/en/. You're more than likely going to hear nothing but a buzzing sound. If you're lucky, you'll hear somebody speaking in Russian. Hopefully, nothing bad is about to happen. Before 1990, the only folks who knew about the buzzer were the people using shortwave and the folks using it or listening to it, and a few ham operators who found this signal, this message, to be fascinating and sometimes a bit scary. An Estonian technician, entrepreneur named Andrus Aslad, had been listening to and thought that the best way to figure out what was going on was to get more people listening. Shortwave was an early form of the internet. If you really wanted to know what was going on the other side of the planet, you could jump on the radio and ask. Unlike today with the fact checkers who only give us their ideas of the truth, most ham operators had no agenda. So they would tell you what they knew. There were enough people listening and talking to weed out the trash. Aslad went by the nickname of Lod. He managed to put together enough electronics to not only pull in the signal, but to retransmit it over the web. This was followed by more people hearing about the buzzer and beginning to tune in as well. Before the fall of the Soviet Union, many people, me included, believed the world was in imminent danger of total destruction. Having grown up in this time, I find it very difficult to get worried about things like the Y2K disaster, the Mayan predictions for December 21st, 2012, the Black Plague of 2020, just about any coming apocalypse. The more the news tells us, this is it, we're all gonna die, the less I pay attention. Lamestream media has kind of lied themselves into non relevance. Now you can decide for yourself. Is this buzzer something we need to worry about? Or is some fancy means for a Russian military to send instructions to some agent? It's time to buy that lucrative stock we were talking about. Would a Russian radio operator try to use a southern accent? Was that even a southern accent? Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell people you don't even like. They should be listening to Strange Things. Until next time, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.